Hello and welcome to Beyond a Podcast with your hosts, Jack and
Lauren.
Today, we are going to be going over champion mentality and behavior. We're going to go into training intensity, how to know you're training at the right intensity, and obviously when you're pushing that, what is good pain versus bad pain. Now, something that we deal with a lot is with our clients who compete is trying to instill that champion mentality. Now, luckily for me, I work alongside an amazing competitor who I think really embodies this. So I think she's the best person to be able to speak to about what is champion mentality, Lauren.
That's very sweet. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Jack. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look, Jack's going to share his own opinions on champion mentality, working with a lot of clients and competitors, and having been in the space for quite a few years, we are able to see the behaviors and help people foster those mindset and behaviors. So what is a champion mentality or a champion mindset? Essentially, it's a growth mindset. So the exact definition, so to speak, is someone who views challenges and obstacles as a chance to learn and to grow. There's a few, let's call them pillars, or a few identifying factors within psychology that we would look at for champion mentality. So it's someone who strives to find their greatness, someone who wants to achieve their ultimate potential, someone who appreciates the battle over the win. And I think that's huge. As us as humans, we're constantly seeking essentially happiness and that feeling of fulfillment. And we think that that is an end point. Once I get X, I will be happy. But really, it is the journey. It is the process. So that whole concept of someone who is able to appreciate the battle, not just the win. Love that. Love that. It's someone who isn't afraid to fail, to grow, or isn't afraid to lose, to grow. So something that we talk about with our clients a lot is the mindset that we never lose. We either win or we learn. So whenever we have a client come across an obstacle, or they have a bad day, or something doesn't go according to plan, we say we haven't lost in this moment, we haven't lost in this day. Rather, we have been given an opportunity to learn and to grow, to better ourselves in the future. It's all just a mindset. It's how we decide to approach things. And then finally, it's loyalty to the goal. And this is something I've spoken about before. And this is, again, something Jack and I work with a lot in our clients. It's essentially discipline. If you want to achieve something, you've got to be disciplined. You've got to have loyalty to that goal. So someone who has a champion mindset, or someone who applies a growth mindset into their everyday, it's someone who can maintain focus. They strive for excellence. They understand that perfection is not the goal. We find that driven people, or people that tend to be attracted to the competing world, are also perfectionists in a lot of ways. They're 0 to 100, and if they can't be perfect, they kind of go off track a little bit. So yeah, it's understanding the goal isn't perfection, but it is that constant growth and that constant evolving and that constant learning. We want to view challenges as opportunities rather than falling into victim mentalities, which is something that Jack is going to kind of speak on a little bit more. And then essentially, so I wanted to share, there was a couple of quotes from Chris Bumstead. So most people will know who this person is. C-Bum. He's an absolute legend in the bodybuilding space. So two particular quotes that I think will really speak to you listeners. Those of you, most of you, are going to be competitors, which is, winning has no finish line. So again, it's that concept that we're not aiming for just the finish. We're not trying to get to one particular point, but rather it's the constant journey. When you can change your mindset and start to understand that you're not trying to reach an end point and final destination, your mental health, your happiness, your sense of purpose, your sense of self, everything will level up. And finally, the other one is we want to essentially choose to do everything in our power to achieve our best result. So again, C-Bum. So choose everything you can to achieve your best result. And this starts to carry into this whole I have to versus I get to mindset, which we'll talk about later. But victim mentality is something that comes up a lot in the competing space, a lot in the prep world, and a lot on social media. We see it quite commonly, especially, I would say, new competitors.
Yeah, I mean, like, not just in competitors. I think it's just a really common social it's a really common social trend at the moment in various different camps, on various different sides of politics, in various different walks of life. On the left-hand side or the far right, you know, you've got the incel men movement, which are, you know, angry at women, angry at, you know, wanting things to go back to the way they were, or that side. And then you've also got the other side, which is the, you know, angry feminists, which are like, it's the patriarchy and all that. And so when that comes into competing in competitors, essentially what it is it's external blame for their problems. And the biggest thing that I think we learn through the process of bettering yourself through your health is being able to take that power and apply it to your life, because the most you can get out of life will come from your actions having a direct impact on your quality of life. If we are in a constant state of blaming external things for our problems, then we have no ability to change our circumstance for the better. And that, when we come into competing, is a big thing. You know, like for people that are wanting to diet and diet on a time frame, they only have 20 weeks, let's say, or 16 weeks to cut. Yeah, X amount of fat to lose. And if they get into the mindset of it is my body, it's my genetics, it's you know the protocols, it's this, it's that, and it's not looking inward at how I can be better, then what you're going to be in a state of is a complete disappointment when it comes to show day. Because ultimately, most coaches out there know how to, I would say the majority, I would say 95% of coaches out there know how to put someone into a deficit.
You'd hope so.
You'd fucking hope so. So there is no reason why a competitor shouldn't be able to get leaner through their competition and be ready, unless, you know, the coach hasn't planned out far enough, or, and this is the most common one, the client hasn't been compliant. Right. And that compliancy comes down to not willing to take responsibility for their actions and choices and decisions. And this is where victim mentality can come into. For example, you know, when that does happen and protocols tend to get harder or get dialed up, the attitude that you hear is, I have to do my 14,000 steps today, or I have to drop my calories this week. And that doesn't lead to anywhere productive. It leads to a point of, I'm being forced to do this. This sucks. This is negative. It's the complaint. And I don't know who they think is listening to that complaint and is going to change things for them, because no one can. I mean, like, if they complain to their coach and say, oh, well, you know, these protocols suck. This sucks. I'm hard. It's like, well, as a coach, you came to me to achieve this goal, and I'm giving you the roadmap to achieve that goal. It sucks. Yeah, it does. So what? Like, that's in all honesty, it's like, yeah, that's the path you've chosen. You want to compete in a competition. You want to try and be the best on stage. 95% of the competitors we work with, when it comes down to it, they all want to win.
Yes.
Right. Even if you come into it like, I just want to do my best on the day, every single person I've worked with over the last 3 to 4 years with you, when it comes into those last 8 to 6 weeks before show, even in the last 2 weeks, there's always that question of, will I be ready? Oh my God, these people look so much better than me, all of this stuff. And there are always those people that say, you know, oh, I don't care about my placing. I just want to do the best thing for me. But there are also those same people that complain about the process, say it's too hard, say it's difficult, and basically don't take ownership of their actions throughout prep or their compliance throughout that prep. So we really want to try and avoid the victim mentality, because it's going to leave you in a negative headspace kind of moving through your prep. It's also not going to help you at any stage throughout your prep. It's not going to help you be better. There's no upside to it, except it's maybe a bit cathartic. It basically, it's cathartic to the point where you feel like you don't have to take ownership. Therefore, it's not your fault, and therefore you don't have to deal with that negative emotion.
It's challenging to go through the hard.
Yeah.
And that's the point. When we are choosing to do a prep, and as much as many people want to hear this because they see the glitz and glam of stage, they see the incredible physiques, they see these bikini models on stage and the fitness models on stage, and they see these people on social media and they just think, wow, I want to look like that. I want to be like that. I want to have that experience. That show day is one tiny tiny aspect of what it is to be a competitor and essentially a bodybuilder. Because even in the federations which have a bikini category that is a lower level of muscle and lower level of condition, it still requires a decent amount of muscle and
Yeah.
of course discipline and adherence to the process and the protocols to bring that physique that looks effortless.
Yeah.
It's not effortless, and it does require that time and that dedication, and taking your body and your mind to a place that is ultimately unsustainable will mean that you are going to have to get very far out of your comfort zone in everything that you do in order to get there. As soon as we get out of our comfort zone, it's uncomfortable. It sucks. We love and we want to love the process the majority of the time, but I will speak with complete honesty and say, I don't love it every day. Every single prep I do, I have those days where I am tired, I am hungry, I am downregulated, I'm grinding myself into the ground, and I sit back and I go, why the fuck am I doing this again?
Yeah.
Like, why am I doing this again? And that's where we really do have to take a step back and remind ourselves of that. Why? So why do we go to a coach to do a bodybuilding show? Why do we want to compete? Why do we want to put ourselves through that challenge? And it's when we come to the hard that I like to remind myself, and this is what we say to our clients, this is what you wanted. You wanted the hard. You wanted to challenge yourself. So here it is. Embrace it and fucking love it.
Yeah. Like the old mindset of like, I really enjoy my fitness and I want to take it to the next level. I want to challenge myself by taking it to the next level. And this is what it means to challenge yourself and take it to that next level. When you were talking about how hard you find it, it made me think of something that I heard the other day around meditation and trying to have a better mindset or trying to achieve enlightenment. And it was a story about this guy, and he would meditate every day. And the whole point of meditation is to try and bring yourself to the present and try and bring yourself and be completely present within your own body and control your wavering thoughts. Anyone knows how hard it is to control your thoughts. If I tell you to not think about a pink elephant right now, guarantee you're thinking about a pink elephant. It's really hard to control our thoughts. And in our day-to-day lives, we're very dopamine driven. We're very easily distracted. And the whole point of this was that you don't get to a point where you achieve complete enlightenment, where you're always completely present. That's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to train that muscle to try and bring you into the present more often throughout the day, because you will be distracted. You will have things come up. You'll get stressed. You'll be future thinking. You'll be past thinking, all of these different things. And it's the same thing when it comes to champion mindset. You don't wake up one day and just have a champion mindset for the rest of your life and that's it. It is a constant work to make better decisions that are going to serve you, your goal, and your purpose ongoing. So just because you do wake up and have days where you hate the process or you hate your steps or you hate your coach or you hate your training doesn't mean that you don't have a champion mindset. It's all about how you approach that on that day. If you start looking outwardly for blame on why it is this way, that's where you need to try and rein it in and look inwards, because no one's forced you to prep. No one's forced you to have this goal. You've chosen to have this goal. You've chosen to put yourself through this process and you chose it for a reason. So you have to honor that reason. And that comes down to discipline, right? It comes down to ensuring that you're making choices that serve those goals every single day, even if you don't want to. Like, we don't always have motivation to do the right thing. Motivation is like maybe 30% of the time, I would say, on a day-to-day basis. You're not super connected and excited about the future on a day-to-day basis. And especially with a sport like bodybuilding, which is 24/7, you have to manage your food all day. You have to hit your output all day. You then have to make sure you're getting enough recovery and sleep. You have to manage your training intensity. It's a all-encompassing sport. So you have to rely on discipline, because there's no fucking way that you're going to wake up in the morning. Like, have you ever seen the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, where he plays
the really happy one?
Yeah,
that's great.
He plays a non-playable character,
Yes.
NPC, and he just wakes up and he's really smiley. It's the same thing every day. Can
you imagine?
He's just like, the same blue shirt. Put it on.
so what prep is, though. It's the same fucking thing
and
every
he just
single
wakes
day.
up. But he's smiley every day. He walks down the street, gets punched in the face by the same bank robber, and he's like, just another Tuesday. That's not what a competitor's like. But this is where you have to train your mindset and have to bring in exercises to try and find the positive in your day. You talk about this a lot, and it's gratitude.
Mm.
How do you, Lauren, find the gratitude as you kind of go through prep?
I think it's so important that people know it isn't something you wake up with. What you just said there, it's a constant practice and it's a constant battle. And as with anything, the more you do something, the better you get.
Yeah.
I was not who I am today when I started my competing journey. I did not have the same level of discipline. I did not have the same willpower. I did not have the same mentality I have today. I've been practicing this craft for a decade. If you do anything for 10 years, it gets simpler. We say this all the time. Prep is never easy. It doesn't matter how often you do it. It doesn't get easier. You are still pushing your mind and your body to unsustainable places. That's always going to be fucking hard, but it gets simpler as you understand yourself, understand your needs, understand the process, and you do shift your mentality. So when I first started competing, I complained, hated it. I bitched and moaned. I would be hungry and tired, and I would complain to my mum all the time and say this sucks, and I'd be up at 4 a.m. to be able to go and do my cardio and my training before I went to work as a high school teacher, and I'd complain about it to everyone around me. And when I got my protocols given to me, I would sometimes have a cry about it. Something I never did on my journey was whenever a coach gave me something, I don't think ever in my process I went back to that coach and said, I can't do that thing. I have always had the mentality, and this even came in from before competing, of I'll try everything once. I'll try it. Because if it's not going to work, that's fine. I won't know that until I've tried it. So even when I first started competing and I began my journey trying to prep myself. So I spent the first couple months trying to prep myself off of bodybuilding.com. So I put myself straight on to 1,200 calories, obscene amounts of output, stuffed it right from the get-go. So I had to beg my then coach, Nick, to take me on, because as we would these days, we probably wouldn't take that person on because they were down-regulated, doing crazy amounts of output, eating very little food with 12 weeks to go. It's stupid. And he said no. He's like, no way. And I begged and I begged and I begged and I begged. Eventually he said, okay, but this is going to suck. This is going to hurt. This is going to be awful. So it's up until this year was the hardest prep last year was the hardest prep I'd ever done. But I think it's one of the best things that could have started my competing career because it was so hard. And I had to beg this coach to take me on. And I promised, I said, if you take me on, I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to do it because I've dug my hole and I need you to get me out of it. And you don't want to because you know I've basically shot myself in the foot, and you're telling me to do a later show just to get myself out of this hole, and I don't want to do that. So it's the best thing that could have happened because it did suck, just like he said it would, but I didn't complain to him because I begged him for it, so I didn't want to eat my words. And that kind of carried into, okay, well, if I get given something, I'll try it. I won't complain to my coach. I'll never say to my coach, I can't. And that presumption also came from a respect of the person. I think it's so important that you are working with a coach that you can respect and essentially practices what they preach. Now, they don't have to be a competitor themselves, but they have to understand what it is to put the mind and body through their limits. Because if my coach is telling me to do something, my presumption is, okay, it's achievable. They're not going to give me something unachievable. It's not easy, but it's not supposed to be. The sport of competing is not supposed to be easy. It never was going to be easy. So as you said, the understanding is that you're choosing to do this. You're choosing to put yourself into this process. So even though we are going to complain, it is going to suck, we do have to go through that learning of mindset. The more you do it, the simpler it gets and the more you will develop that champion mentality. But you've got to approach it from the right mentality from the get-go. And that's with an understanding of, I don't have to, I get to.
Yep.
I get to do this for my goal. This is what I want for myself. I can quit at any time. And the most important thing that we really try and drill into our clients, because something we really do believe in is fostering positive role models. So the next generation of competitors is essentially going to come from the coaches. It's how we train those competitors to be. We train the athletes, and what we train into them is prep is a privilege. It is a fucking privilege to be able to choose to diet and choose to be hungry when there's people in the world who are suffering and hungry. It is a privilege to be able to go to the gym. They don't have that choice.
Yeah.
They don't have that choice. They are downregulated. They are starving. They are dying, quite literally. And there are people out there saying, I'm dying. I'm so hungry because I have chosen to put myself in this prep.
I have this thing that's just come to mind. It's just a really interesting story. And it was about this man back in the 1950s, I want to say. And he was a very, very, very overweight man. He was obese. And he essentially said he was going to stop eating to lose weight and see how long it would take him or how long he could do it. Right. And doctors essentially said, they were like, wow, this is stupid. Don't do it.
Yes.
But if you're going to do it, can we document it? And, see what happens. Essentially, this man, I can't remember his name. I'll look it up. But this man, he didn't eat. He only drank water. He got given vitamins and minerals to keep him obviously functioning, but he didn't eat a single thing. He would go to the toilet about once a month.
Wow.
So it's almost like Kim Jong-un in the interview, doesn't have a butthole. He would poop like maybe once a month. He would obviously urinate because he's drinking water. He went for 380 days without eating, and he lost over 100 kilograms of body fat.
Wow.
He survived for over a year and a month without eating.
And I'm willing to bet he didn't go into starvation mode and stop dropping fat, right?
Well, no, he lost 100 kilos, so I don't think he dropped. He lost a lot of weight.
Exactly.
So, and that's because fat is a unit of calorie measurement. It's an energy measurement. We need it to live. We need energy to live. We will burn the calories if we are not consuming more calories than we're burning. It's such a great example because I see this all the time with clients. They're like, I'm starving, this and that. And I'm like, you got 40 kilograms of extra body fat on you. Do you know how many calories it is? 7,700 per kilo of body fat on a human being, right? So 40 times 7,700 calories. It's a fucking load of calories. Like, you could, like, if you're a person, your BMR is 1,500, you could burn a kilo of body fat and not eat for 5 days. That is not a recommendation at all. This is all theoretical energy units. But the point being is that a lot of people go into this and like, I'm starving, I'm dying, this is too hard. And it's like, look, you're getting adequate protein, you're getting adequate amount of fat, you're well above your BMR, you're not starving or dying, you're hungry. You don't, like, we live in the Western culture where we have Uber Eats at our fingertips. We've got Coles across the street. We don't know what it feels like to be hungry. And this is something you have to learn if you are going to be a competitor. At some point, you're going to be hungry. A lot of competitors spend the majority of their prep trying to avoid hunger at all costs.
They fear it.
They fear it, which is understandable. Like if it's something you're not experienced, you're not used to, you're going to fear it. But they try and avoid it at all costs. And eventually you're going to have to just sit with hunger and go through it.
It comes back into that champion mentality because you're right. So many people will turn to the sugar-free gums and the sugar-free anythings they can get their hand on to feel satiated, the soft drinks, the eating celery. I was this person for a time as well. I used to snack on celery sticks just to get through the hunger. Now, the reality is anytime we begin the digestive process, so mastication, chewing, it signals to our body that we are about to consume a meal. So we start to secrete all of the digestive enzymes. If we're not eating a meal, one, we're secreting all of these digestive enzymes, acids, which are going to damage that stomach because there's nothing in there. And it's going to signal to the brain, hey, I'm eating. but we don't get those stretch receptors that say, hey, I'm full. So our brain's like, hey,
You need to keep eating.
keep eating. Where's the food? So you're only making yourself hungrier. So Jack's so right. You have to learn to be able to just sit with hunger. And that's not literally. You don't have to just sit there and be hungry, but you got to accept the fact that you're going to be hungry, and then you got to be able to distract, move on with your day, acknowledge that it's uncomfortable. And yes, it does suck, and that's okay. It's not going to be easy.
Ironically, we were talking about this morning. I'm currently dieting on very low calories. And I've got a meal plan from my coach. And they're all different meals that I've never had before. I had my breakfast this morning and wasn't very satiating. It was not like I normally have. I tried it. I was like, it's tasty. It's really cool. But it wasn't satiating. I was hungry again in an hour and a half. So then I had another meal to keep me going. And then I was like, I was still hungry. And Lauren was talking to me about this. And she was saying, like, unfortunately, you know, meal plans that we often get put on meal plans, they are designed for taste rather than satiation. They're designed to be palatable and look cool and be exciting and novelty, rather than necessarily being the best thing for satiation and volume, things like that. And I said to you, I actually prefer being hungry and being satisfied with my food and having variety than being completely satiated and hating the meal that I'm eating. And so you got to choose your hard. That's my hard. I can sit with hunger for a few hours, 4 hours. I'm fine with that, knowing that my next meal is going to be really tasty. I can also find meals that I can eat on a day-to-day basis, which are satiating, which are filling. But for me to go through a long period of dieting or to lose a lot of weight, I know that at some point I'm going to need to change things up. Otherwise, I'm going to become restless, bored, demotivated. You've got to find, obviously, a diet that does work for you in the long term. Obviously, you have to balance those things depending on what you're doing. So I'm not a competitor. I'm not like, if I get too down regulated, I can just come out of a diet. Doesn't change anything. Maybe my personal goals get cut a little bit short, but I can go back up to maintenance. I can upregulate. When you are prepping for a competition, though, you've got a finite amount of time. You've committed to a certain date. You need to start looking at all those 1%. It's a different thing for a different situation. If I was competing for a show or I was prepping for a show, my main goal, and because I was going to be taking myself to an unsustainable level of health, I would be looking at all the 1%ers to optimize my health throughout that process.
Yeah, exactly. So different goals for different people, different approaches for different people. With our lifestyle clients, or those clients who are wanting to change their body composition, diet, get stronger, or just wanting to change themselves in general, but not to an extreme or unsustainable level, the approach we use is balance. Because it is sustainable long term. We don't want them dieting in an unsustainable way, because when they have to then come out of that and go back to regular life, they can't just continue the habits. So for someone who isn't doing something extreme, we do want to have palatable, enjoyable food, and we want our meals to be satiating, and we want to learn to understand how to find that sweet spot between, well, yes, I'll be hungry in a diet, but I need more volume foods. I need to understand meal timings, but yes, it can also have a taste factor to it.
Yeah, and you have to understand what you're going to be best suited to. Like, some people just can't handle hunger, especially when they're first starting to learn how to diet. This is the difference between obviously doing a comp prep and doing a diet. You know, a diet, you're learning the skill dieting, you're learning that process, you're learning to deal with like being hungry from time to time, and you're not going to die. When you're prepping for a show, you should already know how to diet.
Yes. If you have never been able to have a successful diet, achieve a happy, healthy body composition, and sustain it for a long period of time, you're not ready to go into a comp cut. We see it so often, people going from overweight to stage condition. And there's this great big chunk that's missing. And the level of dieting and change to the body in that process, and change to habits and lifestyle and everything, some people come out okay. Unfortunately, most of them don't. So really, you want to be able to be that person who, you enjoy training, you enjoy tracking your food, you know how to sustain a healthy body comp. You are basically that competitor already in the way that you live, a competitor in their off season, so that you can say, right, now I'm going to take it to the next level with that comp cut. And that's where you do have to start to make sacrifices. So being able to be hungry. And for me, I'm the opposite to Jack. I don't care about taste as much when I'm on prep. I love food. So let's not get that wrong and say, like, I'm not interested in food. I don't care about desserts. I love food. I'm a foodie. I love dessert. Like, I love it, right? Because so many people say to me, I could never prep because I love food. Like, well, I fucking love food. But I love prep more at certain times of the year. So in that cut process, and there's studies on this, and Jackson Pierce talks about this quite a lot and in a very, very good way. And it's also spoken about in J3 University as well with John Jewett. Satiety is one of the most important things when we are dieting for a comp. We've got to try and keep ourselves satiated as best as we can. And then nutrients for performance, recovery, and results. Those are your priorities. Anything that's highly palatable is going to make dieting harder. And it's going to make the whole process more challenging. It is already challenging. We need to be thinking, as Jack said earlier, when we're taking our body to an unsustainable and ultimately unhealthy place, because competing's not healthy, we need to be making the decisions that are going to optimize our health, are going to allow us to work at our best, operate at our best, feel our best, and function at our best at all times, and be able to come out the back end of that and get back to some level of normality and not have to spend the next 6, 9, 12 plus months fixing our mindset, our health, our relationships with self, our relationships with food. So there's a lot that really does go into that does go into food. I think we've kind of come away a little bit from the whole champion mentality and how to get there from that side. But it is a practice, and you will get better at it the more that you compete. Working with the right coach is, I think, the first step, because they're going to help foster that champion mentality in you right from the get-go. They will call you out on your bullshit. They will help you identify your limiting thoughts and your limiting beliefs. They are going to help you become that person because they care. They care about your health, they care about your result, and they care about you becoming that champion, because they know that when you become that champion and that athlete, you will then inspire the next generation and so on. So getting the right coach, someone who can talk you through that process, is, I think, just so important.
Yeah. I think to kind of summarize champion mindset, it's about understanding that every 1% of improvement that you can do on everything you can do makes a massive difference between doing and excelling.
There's a big difference between just doing something and excelling at it.
Yeah. Look, if you just want to do something, cool beans. But if you want to win, if your mindset is that I want to be the best and I want to be, set the standard for something, and I want to be, the winner on show day. You talked about this in a post the other day around posing and how your compliance on prep and your ability to go for those 1%ers is going to translate to how confident you are on stage with your posing, and it's going to shine in your stage presence, because when you get out there, you're going to know, and you're going to remember all those times where you were like, you know what, I'm going to, drop this last set, or I'm not going to, I'm going to have a couple hundred calories here and it doesn't matter, or I'm going to, stay out late with my friends and go party rather than getting a good night's sleep, and because I've got a heavy leg session tomorrow. All these little things add up, and you realize, especially when you're standing on stage next to people who have a really amazing physique, you're wondering, fuck, if I'd done all of these little things, would I be in a better place? Would I look better than them? Would I have a better shot?
So I think bodybuilding as a sport has definitely become more popularized in the sense that it is more attainable in the categories that are on offer, so more people can compete. And so there are those who are competing to challenge themselves, just to be able to have the experience, just to be able to take themselves to their best place. And that's great. That's fine. But then you get the competitor who does want to go on to be the best. Now, obviously, as you said before, everyone that competes, we all want to win. We'd all love to have a pro card for the status that we feel it provides us, or for what we think it will give us. A pro card, and I've spoken about this quite a lot on Reels on my social media, is ultimately just an invitation to compete on a pro stage with other professionals, others who are at the top level. So that competitor who wants to take themselves to the pro level, to be the elite, to become the best of the best, they really do have to operate at a higher level. A competitor who just wants to challenge themselves as you were speaking about today, might only have to do protocols to an extent that allows them to be better than who they were yesterday. But a competitor who wants to be the best of the best and operate at the elite, as I said, they need to be focusing on the tiny things. Every competitor, we would hope, would be doing their training, sticking to their macros, calories, or meal plan, doing some kind of posing practice. They're doing the basics. If you want to go to the next level, you've got to act at the next level. So this is looking at all of the tiny details like food choices and food quality to ensure that your health is at the best it can be when you are in a deficit, because ultimately when we're in a deficit, our energy intake is lower. The amount of nutrients and minerals we can get in will be lower. We need to make sure that we're staying hydrated. We are prioritizing our recovery so that we can actually rebuild after our training sessions and keep our body functioning at the best of its ability. We need to be, unfortunately, making sacrifices. So it might be not trying to fit in the highly palatable food because we can flexible diet and we can fit it in, but wanting to make the choice of the food that's going to serve our mind, our body, our performance, our recovery. Wanting to make that decision, not feeling like we're forced to make that decision. Giving up social occasions to an extent. You don't have to become a hermit. You can still go to parties and you can still socialize and have date nights. But inevitably, you're going to reach a point in your prep where you might have to leave those events early. You can't stay up to 2 a.m. like everyone else partying, even if you're not choosing to drink and you're not choosing to eat and you're on energy drinks, because it's going to have a big impact on your health and that's going to carry over into everything else. So something that we battle quite a lot with competitors is sleep and alcohol. They're two of the big ones, because I would say that these are two major aspects of socializing, and socializing is such an important part of being a human. So when we say to people that they're going to have to sacrifice something eventually, they're going to have to leave the party early, they're going to have to not be out so late, they're going to have to give up their glass of wine every night, there's a lot of resistances to that. The champion mentality, the 1%, is wanting to not give those things up because it shouldn't be a sacrifice. That's not the mentality, but choosing to make the choice that's going to serve the goal better. So what a lot of people don't realize is alcohol, one, has got calories. So we do have to account for that within our calorie intake for the day. If we are on a very low amount of calories or we are in a deficit, that's taking away from potential nutrients and minerals and actual beneficial food, because alcohol offers us nothing. When we consume alcohol, our body will prioritize metabolizing that alcohol over everything else. Negative, bad, especially if we are trying to lose fat and we are cutting into a show. It's also going to limit our HGH. So this is our human growth hormone. What it does is it limits the release of HGH from the hypothalamus. And take a little pause.
It's better if you just stop talking rather than continuing to talk and straight into it. Let's take a little pause, because then it's harder to cut.
Okay, I'll say that part again. So alcohol consumption inhibits the HGH release from the hypothalamus and the secretion of HGH. So HGH is our human growth hormone, and that is responsible for growth. Really important when we are, one, in a bulk and a build and we're trying to build muscle, but really important if we're in a cut and we are trying to sustain our muscle as well. So HGH not only is impacted by alcohol consumption, but also by a lack of sleep. So it's released intermittently throughout the day, but it's released predominantly in the night when we're in our deep sleep. So it's these tiny things. If we're choosing to stay up late instead of going to bed, we're impacting the release of that growth hormone. And if we're choosing to have even one drink, we're not only impacting that growth hormone, we're going to experience inflammation, which is going to impact our body's capacity to digest, assimilate nutrients. It's going to have an impact on the scale. It's going to have an impact on our overall energy. It's going to impact that sleep. So all these tiny things have a huge impact on the following day and on our results. Even though we can technically get away with it, that's not that mindset of someone who's trying to be their best. So we really do need to look into like the importance of sleep, the importance of recovery, the importance of all of these tiny factors. And other hormones are impacted, and there's obviously a lot of other impacts by sleep, alcohol, all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, Jack, you obviously talk to clients about this quite a lot. It's like the importance of sleep and setting up sleep routines and all of those kind of tiny details. We try and foster that education in our clients, I guess.
Yeah. So you just spoke about the importance of sleep and the effect on human growth hormone. And it can't be understated how much it makes a massive difference. In real terms, if you're looking at any stage of your prep, whether it's growth, whether it's cutting, or even if you're just, a general population client just dieting, sleep has such a massive impact on your ability to recover from your training especially for muscle growth, for being able to build muscle. Your body is building new tissue. You need that sweet spot of being in bed by a reasonable time so that you can have the human growth hormone released into your body at the optimal levels so that your body can then utilize that signaling to actually grow and grow muscle. Now, that's obviously super important when you're building. You need to also be able to recover from training so that you're not too sore the next day, so that you can train again intensely, because the intensity of your training makes a massive difference to, how much you grow. Now, when you're cutting, it starts to be a little bit more different in the fact that we're no longer trying to grow, but we still need to be able to adequately recover so that we can go and train again. We still need to be able to retain as much muscle as possible. So when we're cutting, the goal is to not build muscle, but to retain as much muscle as possible. So sleep and recovery is just as important then. But also from the mentality and mental side of things, your ability to adhere to the protocols will be negatively impacted if you're sleep deprived. Your willpower will go down, your energy levels will go down, your mental clarity will go down. So basically, stupid decisions become more prevalent. Your energy goes down, so then obviously you're not able to train as well. You're not going to feel as up to your steps. You're not going to feel as up to your cardio. It has a massive domino effect on all of these other aspects of your prep, more than just, I'm feeling a little tired today. So you really want to focus on prioritizing that all the way through your prep, no matter what. We live in a society that's kind of demonized getting enough sleep. You're seen as lazy for sleeping. And it's fucking crazy, because you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to be able to recover. You need to be able to do that so that you can function as optimally as possible as a human. So one of the things that we love to try and bring in is a positive sleep routine with our clients. Now, that can take different forms depending on the person's, household, routine, job, all these things. But the main thing is you want to try and, as much as possible, find a consistency in the routine. Biggest things that I've learned that are going to be massive impacts is stimulus before bed. And so that can be whether you've trained just before bed. Like some people train in the evening. I don't think it's as optimal, because after training for myself, although I'm tired, I'm pretty wired. Like, you've been going hard at the gym, your adrenaline's going to be up, your cortisol level is going to be up. Those are two opposing things that are going to make you go, yeah, I'm going to sleep right now. It doesn't mean a few hours later that you're not going to be able to sleep once you've calmed down, but that's obviously going to have an impact. Now, the other thing that's going to have an impact when I talk about stimulants is caffeine. So obviously, one of the things as we kind of go through prep, people are going to become more reliant on caffeine. And there actually becomes a point where we start to say, actually, we need to pull back on caffeine, which is kind of like, people like, don't take away my coffee. But it has an impact on your ability to assimilate and basically absorb vitamin C, which is going to impact your immune system, and your ability to assimilate iron. If you don't have good enough levels of vitamin C, then you're not going to be able to assimilate as much iron. So there's like knock-on effects to that. But the other side of that is obviously if you're drinking too much caffeine too late in the day, caffeine has a 12-hour half-life, which means essentially if you've had 250 milligrams of caffeine at 12 o'clock and in the middle of the day, you're going to have 125 milligrams of caffeine by 12 midnight that evening. So obviously if you're training in it like any later than early morning, that pre-workout you're having is probably going to lead into start impacting your sleep. And that's obviously just the legal side of things, and when you start looking at alcohol and how that impacts your REM sleep, how that impacts your ability to recover from your training, it starts to obviously have a knock-on effect. The other side of things, which are the more common ones when you start to look at prep people and people's kind of habits that we don't think are going to have an impact, scrolling on your phone, in the hour before bed. it's highly stimulating, and I believe it actually impacts your cortisol levels as well. And that's going to impact your ability to fall off and drift into sleep. We get into the, I'm guilty of it, doom scrolling. Lauren, you're guilty of it
I'm
too,
terrible
right?
at it.
So we've actually instilled this habit for us that we now, when we get into bed, we're either reading books or we're listening to podcasts. We're not on our phone. So we're trying to reduce that impact on us. And obviously, like, as you kind of get deeper into prep, it can be difficult to do that if you're suffering through it, but it will make a massive difference. The other side of things is light exposure. So anyone that wants to have more in-depth understanding of how to regulate your sleep, I highly recommend you go and listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast. If you don't already know who he is, he's a neuroscientist that works out of a neuroscientist professor that works out of a university in America. I can't remember specifically which one. And he's got an amazing podcast on how to optimize your sleep. And the biggest thing that he says is actually sleep is regulated by light. And this is why we have daylight savings in certain areas of the world. We start our morning body clock by the exposure of daylight. And we also start our evening body clock by the exposure of low light, afternoon, sunset light. And with the invention of the modern light bulbs, also invented more insomnia. Overhead lights like this, and obviously bright lights from TV or computer screens, can really fuck with your body's natural circadian rhythm, which basically starts the release of melatonin to actually, well, you start releasing melatonin from the morning right onwards, but it basically suppresses that a little bit into the evening and makes it harder to drift off and fall asleep. So one of the recommendations that he has in his podcast is actually to start using lamps, candles in the evening after the sun goes down to create more low-level light, not using overhead lights where you can, and that makes a massive difference. The other side of things is obviously when you wanting to go to sleep is being able to block out any additional light or artificial light in the room. Me and Lauren both wear sleep masks to help us fall asleep better. And the next thing is obviously audio, noise, things like that. So actually we either listen to a podcast that automatically turns off for half an hour to help us focus our thoughts on that noise rather than letting it run wild. Because a lot of the time when we're leading into prep, we're stressed. Yes. We're thinking about all the things we need to do, thinking about posing, and it can be quite hard to switch off your brain. So that was one of the things that really helped in your last prep, was having that podcast on. Or you can just use, white noise. I also have, the Fitbit Premium app, which has some like rain noises with some music, and it calms us down. It helps us drift off to sleep. So obviously you want to control your audio, your visual, and finally your temperature as much as you can. I know not everyone has aircon in their room, and some people live in a hot climate. Having a cool room temperature makes a huge difference to how deeply you sleep and the quality of your sleep. So those little things should help you with that. Now, obviously, the next thing is obviously just going to bed at a reasonable time. So working backwards from the time that you need to wake up and realize how many hours you need to actually be in bed, and then provide that time prior to bed for you to be able to kind of get ready. So a lot of people go, okay, I need to be asleep at 10. So I'll get into bed at 9:45. No one falls asleep in 15 minutes, right? Especially if you're going to go on your phone, which you shouldn't be doing. You need to allow yourself 45 minutes to settle into bed, get ready, get into bed and have that time to drift off. So we talk about a pre-bedtime ritual. So obviously talking about, the lighting, music or podcasts or whatever, reading, getting yourself set up ahead of time so that you're ready to fall asleep when you need to. Minimizing electronic device exposure, minimize doom scrolling as much as possible. All of these things will make a massive difference when it comes to getting a really good night's sleep. So regimenting that part of things is super important. And that kind of leads into, if we're not getting good enough sleep, this leads into impacting other hormones. So Lauren already talked about human growth hormone. It impacts your testosterone production. Testosterone for men is at the highest in the morning and again in the evening, and it dips in the middle of the day. So if we're sleep deprived and we're not getting that sleep, then our testosterone levels won't be as optimal as they could be, which is going to have an impact on your muscle retention, growth, etc. It also, poor sleep increases cortisol levels, which reduces human growth hormone, test, estrogen. In fact, cortisol is prioritized in your body if we need it. So over all other hormones. So on a day-to-day basis, you consume your fats, and people are wondering, why do I have to consume fats?
Why are
Seems
they
so silly.
essential?
Yeah, why are they essential? Well, we use the cholesterol from healthy fats to actually produce our hormones, all of our sex hormones. And if we're a highly stressed individual and we have high cortisol levels, the body only has a certain amount of cholesterol per day to be able to make all of your sex hormones. Think about it like I have 20 blocks, and out of those 20 blocks, or fuck it, let's do cakes. I've got do cakes.
Delicious.
I've got 5 cakes to make. Each cake has a different amount of eggs to make, and I only have a certain amount of eggs in a day. When I've got high cortisol, that is the priority order. I will use all my eggs to produce that cortisol. And then all of the remaining eggs, the less of them, will then be utilized to produce your other sex hormones, which then obviously will be down regulated. Not going to be feeling great. It impacts massive amount of your energy, your training capacity, obviously your muscle retention, and that's going to lead into having a massive impact on your overall look on stage, as well as your experience of prep. So huge benefits to obviously getting a good night's sleep, huge drastic negatives to not getting a good night's sleep. And so obviously the final thing for getting a good night's sleep is managing your stress levels. So we spoke about, trying to not train immediately before you need to sleep, but obviously for some people that's more difficult than others. Managing your external stresses essentially.
Yeah.
And this can be relationships, it can be work, it can be financials, mental health for sure. So when you're coming into a prep, you need to understand that these are things you need to manage. And if you're not in a place to manage them, you need to set parameters in place or plans in place to be able to management. So one of the things that we communicate a lot of with clients that are showing issues with their mental health is, do you have a therapist? How often do you see them? And we've had clients in the past that have had, poor mental health that relapsed into EDs. And we're like, look, we're not going to put you through a prep unless you are seeing a therapist regularly, because it's completely outside of our scope. We don't want you to fall into negative habits. We don't want the repercussions of you basically doing something without being responsible to your future self.
Yes.
Because it's a massive amount of that is like personal responsibility for what is to come. Obviously you choose a coach and you hope that coach is going to be responsible for giving you the information that you need to make good decisions. But you also need to be responsible for making good decisions yourself, doing the research and looking after yourself. One thing you spoke about way earlier in the podcast was, people trying to lose a lot of weight for a very short period of time to prep when they're not ready. And it's something that no one ever wants to hear. I mean, you've got an overweight client and you're like, look, the reality is that you're borderline obese. You're going to need a long time to lose the initial body weight. Then you're going to need to take a break from dieting and eat at maintenance. The likelihood is you're not going to be on stage for 3 years, right? Yeah, cool. You're 100 kilos. We could lose 50 kilos in the next year and just put you on stage. But they say something like 70% of people that lose a massive amount of weight relapse and regain it all.
I think the number's even higher. Yeah.
It's massive. And that all comes down to the approaches that are used and sustainable habits that are learned along the way. There was even ones where they were talking about studies on people taking drugs that are literally designed to make you lose weight. And they found that the people obviously that took the drugs in the initial lost a lot of weight. They lost like 70% of their fat goal, which is awesome. But as soon as they got taken off the drug, they regained it all and then some in like half the time. Now, they then did further studies on this, and they said they gave people along the way a regimented diet and workout plan. They had check-ins with the scientists and studiers all the way through their diet. They had it for like 6 weeks to 8 weeks afterwards, and they sustained. They did regain a little bit. They sustained their fat loss for a lot longer. And then as soon as that study was over, they regained it again.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that you can't keep off body fat, but the point being is it takes way longer to instill a lifetime of habits and instill other habits and mentalities that are going to sustain you for long term.
A little tidbit just on the whole idea of fat loss and actually sustaining fat loss, particularly for lifestyle. Lane Norton has a really good resource on this. So Lane Norton's Fat Loss Forever is a book you can go and read, and it talks all about the actual physiology of fat loss, how it works, understanding it, the psychological aspects, the identity aspects, sustainable approaches. It goes into it in quite a lot of depth. So that one's something I highly recommend people do read, just for understanding the whole longevity of fat loss and sustaining results.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we've beaten that cow to death. So I think we can move on from that, which is cool.
Yes.
Cool. Final thing that we want to talk about today is training intensity. All right. So there's a couple of different nuances to training intensity. Main thing about training intensity is the word intensity is the basically physical exertion and effort that is put into something, I would say. So when we're talking about training intensity, there's a couple of things would go into. Most people, when they think about training intensity, they think about like how hard I'm lifting the weight, I would say, and how tired I am at the end of a set. And I think that's a great metric to start with. Like, you want to be putting in the effort into every rep, and you want to be feeling pretty fucking fatigued by the end of the set. A lot of people, when they first get into training, you don't need as much intensity to get the stimulus, but as you progress, you're going to need more, and you're going to have to train closer to failure. A lot of people don't understand where their true failure point is. And I think that's something that we've talked about in a previous podcast, but it's something that we test with our clients, especially if they've not worked with a face-to-face coach, and we're going to be doing this at our seminar, which is really cool.
Teaching people to find their failure points.
Yeah. So we basically challenge you guys to do this. Get on a leg press or a leg extension or a chest press or something very stable machine that's going to be safe for you to fail in. But essentially, what I want you to do is I want you to go and take the weight that you normally do for 8 to 10 reps. And then I want you to do that weight to failure. And when I say failure, I need you to have someone there to spot you and for them to push you and push you and push you until you physically cannot squeeze out another rep, until you get halfway up and your muscle collapses.
Because we will want to stop far before that.
Yeah. It's not the point where it gets uncomfortable. It's not the point where your muscles start to burn. It's not the point where you want to quit. It's where your muscle gives out.
Yeah.
Right. And I would definitely save this for the end, maybe potentially the end of a leg session.
Yeah. You don't start with that.
Yeah.
There's good physical indications of that though. Like a really good one is just looking at the tempo or the rate of which someone is performing a rep. If you are finishing your set and you are supposed to be aiming for failure or very close to that failure point, and you are still performing that final rep at the same speed as the first one, probably not maxing yourself out. We should start to see that rate of movement slowing more and more as we're reaching closer to a failure point.
Yeah. That's a great point. And then when you basically trial this exercise out, for the majority of people, if they haven't trained with a PT before, they're not an advanced client, they'll most likely get 5 to 10, sometimes even 20 more reps out than they originally thought was possible. And it's amazing exercise because it really teaches you the difference between where your mind goes and where your body can go. Our bodies are capable of amazing feats.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely has way more potential than we could ever realize, but it's about tapping into it.
Yes.
And it's like where your mind goes, your body will follow. So you've got to be able to tap into that intensity. And that's really important for pushing your boundaries as you kind of progress through your training and being able to train at the intensity that's going to lead to muscle growth, and also to, aid you in retaining that muscle as you kind of go through your prep. Now, you don't always need to train to failure. That's an important point to say. Sometimes, most of the time, we need to train to probably about 2 reps in reserve, but knowing where you have 2 more reps in reserve is really important. If you're lifting a weight and you're like, I've got to 8 to 10 reps, I could probably get 2 more out, and you can really actually get another 10 out, well, then you're way off with the weight that you're lifting, and it should be a goal for you to strive to get closer to that. So that's like the intensity in which you lift. So I'd say like intensity can be measured in the speed in which you're lifting. So like explosive intensity. So you'll see this with power lifters and ollie lifters. They train with a lot of intensity. So there's intensity in terms of how many reps you do over a period of time. And there's intensity in terms of the power in which you put into each rep, right? So for men, for example, we are more adept to putting more intensity into each individual rep and producing power. Whereas for women, you have a higher training capacity and ability to handle volume.
Yep.
So women's training intensity might be better measured with higher rep ranges versus men's in the lower rep ranges. So men might be able to tap into that intensity with strength training more than women can tap into that intensity with strength training. And women might be able, well, probably will be able to handle more reps and load. Actually, I've trained with Lauren. She can handle way more reps than I can. I start to bitch out way sooner. But at the same time, when it comes to strength training, I'll push myself so much fucking harder than you will.
You do.
Yeah.
I do want to add a little note in that as well, because you mentioned a really good point around just our body is capable of so much more than we think it is. And it does come back to that mentality side of thing. And you mentioned a lot of that comes down to muscle growth, obviously, but also muscle retention. So there's a big belief that when we are cutting into a show that we're going to lose a lot of muscle. I heard recently that for females in particular, there isn't actually a lot of muscle lost in the cut if their training performance is sustained. And the most common reason why training performance reduces is because of mentality, not necessarily the dam regulations. That will come in eventually, but we're actually capable of keeping that performance up for the vast majority of our prep. It's just we feel tired, we feel sore, we have the excuses in our mind of I'm dieting, so I'm not capable of still pushing to the same extent. Now, a coach who is intelligent and understands the process of prep will also program strategically to put you more into machines as you're reaching that point so you can still perform at that level safely and without risk of injury. So again, it just comes back to that mentality. So intensity, it's all in the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It is all in the mind. So that's training intensity in terms of the power and the effort and of all that stuff. The next part of intensity I want to look at is the intensity in which you perform each individual rep. And what I mean by that is trying to maintain the uniform nature of each rep and tempo and squeeze. You know, there's a big difference between doing a leg extension where you kick up and then just completely come back down versus going up, squeezing, and then coming back down, trying to get every fiber in that leg to contract in that each rep. That's going to be a very, very different level of intensity to
throwing the weight up.
Throwing the weight up. So the precision in which you execute each rep, you should aim to try and keep this the last rep as good as the first rep.
Yes.
And vice versa. Even your warm-up rep should be within that intent and purpose for quality. Like what you should think about it like is a boutique factory which makes let's come back. Imagine you're working at the Ferrari factory.
Nice.
Or an F1 team. Every single thing on that car is double checked, triple checked, and assured for quality for the highest level of performance.
Yeah.
Right? They don't just produce it and go, they look at each part, they look at how it's produced, they double check the quality, and it's called quality control, right? We want to have that quality control when it comes to our training. Did I push myself as hard as I could today? Did I make the most out of every set and every rep? Did I take myself to a full range of motion? Did I keep to the tempo as best as I could? Did I push the weight up and keep myself at that RPE that I need to be at? Now, as you obviously continue your reps through a set, that level of focus you're going to need to keep up that intensity is going to increase, right? At the beginning, you're mentally more fresh, you're more energized, and the effort that I put into each rep, you know, in terms of my mental load is going to be greater and greater as it goes on. It's going to require more energy, more focus. And that is something that you really need to learn how to do.
Absolutely.
So I look at like training intensity when it comes to that. So quality of each rep, the intent in which I'm doing, and the focus in which I'm doing it. And that kind of leads me into like, you know, what we're doing when we're resting. How are we approaching our gym session? Are we just turning up, going through and going, you know, in between sets, going on Instagram or Facebook or distracting ourselves from what we're doing? one of the things that I've been doing recently is, it's very easy for our mind to wander when we're in the gym. There's a lot of stimulus going around. I like to train with earbuds in so that I can zone out the stimulus. And then obviously in that silence, you can be kind of a little bit stir crazy depending on your neurospiciness. But I put on a podcast so at least I'm focused enough to be able to zone everything out, have something to kind of keep my mind level. But I'm thinking about my next set. I'm thinking about my last set, and I'm thinking about how I can make my next set better and how I can improve my last set. So that when that timer goes off, I'm already primed and ready. Like, I'm not waiting for the time to go off. I'm looking at my watch, looking at a countdown, right?
Yeah.
Getting myself ready so that when it goes off, I'm already unracking the dumbbells or I'm unracking the squat rack. If I've got 15 seconds left, I'm like, cool, I'm going to turn that timer off. I'm going to get it set on my back and I'm just going to go from there. Like, I'm not waiting. I'm not just waiting and off in my own world. I am sitting with anticipation of the next set.
It's with intent.
Yes.
Every moment in the gym has intent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. It's so, so important. I mean, I would say I'd have to actually look into the studies on the impact of this. But if you're not listening to a podcast, potentially the only other thing I'd classify as acceptable would be if you've recorded yourself performing a set. And this would be more so kind of, I suppose, in the warm-ups. You're watching that back. You're looking at your form. You're looking at the breakdown of it. You're seeing if anything's broke down.
Hey, you can listen to hardcore music if you want. I love listening to some fucking dance music that gets me in my vibe, and it's awesome. Go hard, but focus on like the next thing. Like, you can be jamming away, but thinking in your head, okay, this is a fucking great tune, but I know what I want to do next time, and I'm going to use that as my pump up jams to attack that next set.
That brings it back to mindset. You're so right. Like, I know whenever I was training, especially in my off seasons where I'm training hard, and I need to tap into that. I'm about to take myself to a place I really don't fucking want to go. I have particular songs that help take me there.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have that thing that's going to help you get into that uncomfortable place that you don't want to go to.
Yeah. Tap into your emotion. Tap into your energy. Tap into your negativity. Like, utilize that raw energy to take yourself to that uncomfortable place.
There's this fine balance between the raging, screaming, yelling gym bro who's just throwing the weight up and is aggressive and taking just pure, unadulterated, like, anger, and also the meditative approach of training, which is also necessary, which is the I'm here, I'm present, it's that focus, it's that calm. So it's kind of this fine balance between like not allowing that anger to then carry into the rest, and the cortisol to jack up too much and to become too stressed. So it's an art. Training is an art.
Yeah, if you see me in the gym before like a heavy press, I'm staring myself in the mirror, locking eyes with this person, like I'm death staring myself, and I'm focusing on what I'm doing. In my head, in my headphones, it's like I'm dead still and I'm focused on what I'm doing, and that energy is building inside my chest, but it's not coming out in my energy. I'm not wasting energy in my movements. I'm not wasting energy. That is all pent up and it's getting ready to explode. Like I'm thinking of it like, I'm charging something to let go. Like I'm pulling back the band to go for that next set. So, I mean, that's intensity.
That's sick.
Now, once you're training with intensity, do you have anything more to add to that? Any thoughts?
No, I think you absolutely nailed it. That all of those kind of qualities of training are so, so important. And as a beginner trainer, it's very hard to understand where those capacities lie. So being able to get in with a personal trainer or to be able to work with someone even just once allows you to truly understand where your potential lies. Because once you know where it is, then you know whether or not you're reaching that point in your training.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if there was some kind of seminar
I know.
on
in a
training
few
and
weeks,
intensity.
on March 3rd would be great, on a Sunday
In Gold Coast, all of the places that you could do it.
Absolutely. Have a holiday if you're not local.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
Learn
that'd
some
be amazing in like a little private gym that you can just go ham at and then
Follow it
meet.
with a beautiful, relaxing kind of session where you can have this whole community vibe going on.
Yeah, meet some people that are like on the same mindset. It'd be great.
Shameless plug.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No shame here.
No shame.
Plug.
Plug. Come to our workshop. But now look, now you're training with intensity. now you need to be able to learn the difference between good and bad pain, right? Because it's all well and good in training intensity and just going and training through the pain and grinding and things like that. You need to also know when to pull back and when to live to fight another day.
Yes.
As someone with a back injury that I started when it first came on, I was 23 years old. I am now 30, going on 31. It's been a while. Once you have an injury, a back injury or something like that, it's very rare that there is zero ongoing issues with that. That was a poor decision dropping
I'm
that.
so sorry.
Because she's going to grab it now and start dingling it. What I do next time is grab it and put it under a cushion so she can't get
I
it.
was trying to figure out where to get rid of it. That's
Yeah.
a good point. Yeah. So, well, it was good timing with that ding. Start that little bit again.
Yeah, I'm going to start again. I'm just going to continue on. That's why I
There
took
you
a pause.
Yeah. Sorry.
I've talked too much.
I've talked too much.
Talked too much since I last talked. Back pain. Going on 31, I know the difference. That's what I said. So there is a difference between good and bad pain. Now, if you're training with intensity, there's going to be a burning sensation. That's muscular pain, which is the pain that you kind of want to chase.
Yeah.
You want to feel that lactic acid build up. You want to feel that burn. You want to feel that ache. I get on my heavy quad days, I start sometimes getting cramps after I've done that set. And that's not necessarily like, you don't want to be cramping up all the time. I need to manage my electrolyte levels better, obviously. But it's a good indication that you are essentially recruiting as many muscle fibers as you can during that set. When you're pushing with higher reps, that's when you're going to tend to feel the burn more. Higher reps, you're going to get lactic acid build up. And it's actually just a byproduct of your muscle cells respirating. So when we walk, we are aerobically respirating. We are breathing in oxygen and our body is utilizing that to metabolize fat energy and turn it into energy we can use. When we train, we use two types of fuel sources. We use ATP and we use glucose, right? Sugar, essentially. Carbs. Your first 2 reps of a set are going to utilize ATP, right? It's going to use creatine phosphate as a part of that to essentially be able to produce more ATP more efficiently. So creatine's great for improving your training performance. One of the most recognized and studied supplements on the planet. Super safe for the majority of people. The only people that say don't have it are pregnant women because they don't want jack babies coming out. It's essentially it. No, that's not it.
It's not it at all.
Well, that's not it at all. But essentially, creatine's fantastic. It improves your training force output and your ability to train for longer, so your training volume. Anyway, when we use glucose, so ATP is the most cleanest way, but there's no real byproducts. Glucose or glycogen, sorry, the byproduct of that is lactic acid, and that's because we burn it anaerobically with no oxygen. And so that lactic acid is the burning sensation that you get in the muscles, and it's because your body cannot get enough oxygen to produce energy aerobically to continue those reps. So it is a byproduct that will happen, and you kind of just got to go through it. Learn to love it. It will pass after you finish your set. You just need to breathe. But that's a good pain. And you might also get, a pump, like where you just feel like the muscles are really tight and, filled with blood. Again, it's a good pain. The pains that you don't want are sharp. I would say that's the best way. Radiating pains and sharp pains are things to avoid. So if you feel any kind of sharp pain or radiating or electrical kind of feeling, like that's electrical is going to be nerve.
Yes.
Sharp could be muscle tear or ligament tear. Most ligaments actually you don't feel, you just hear it pop. That's what happened when my collarbone went. I just felt.
God. But we should never get it. Oh no, we should never get to that point.
You should never
if
get
we
to
understand form.
That's the point. Yeah. So obviously, if you're training with good form, you know how to lift. You're not going to get to that point unless you are literally pushing the upper limits with some guys. I'm sure everyone's seen the video of the pec tear on the incline bench. That guy was pushing it.
That's an elite little.
Yeah. And that can actually be made worse if you're dehydrated. So you're more likely to have muscle tears and things like that, and ligament tears and tendon tears if you're dehydrated. So make sure you're hydrated, people.
Yes.
But those are the main differences between good and bad pain. So sharp pains, avoid. Drawn out, burning pains, run towards it, baby.
This might be a totally inappropriate example to share, but I'm going to share it anyway. It's the kind of, it's not even quite pain, but it's the uncomfortability that feels so intense. It's almost too intense
Yeah.
to go through. And ladies, you probably experience this in some ways in sex. It's that incredibly intense feeling that's sometimes so intense you just feel like you can't keep going, but you want to keep going. That's the feeling. If you're feeling sharp pains in sex also, unless that's your thing, probably not okay.
You know, we went for an hour and a half before you brought sex up.
It had to come up eventually.
That's what she said.
Nice.
Zing.
We almost got away with looking like professional coaches.
Yeah, buddy. So, yeah, I feel the same way about that pain, but ironically, I was actually thinking about this today. How smart is the body to be able to, for our nerves to be able to tell the difference between uncomfortability, pain, pleasure?
And to know when to an extent it's okay.
But when pain is pleasure.
Yes. Where the limits lie. Our body knows where our limits lie. It's our mind that tricks us into thinking we can't handle as much as we can.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about that Rick and Morty episode where it's got the Xenobites from Hellraiser in it, and they're like, pain is pleasure and pleasure is pain.
I love the Xenobites.
And then you're talking about it's all about how hard you can push yourself, you know? We are well off training now.
Yeah, I know.
Bringing it back to training. Anyway, so you want to obviously know the difference between the good and bad pain. You want to be able to push through those uncomfortabilities. Really, pain is like where you physically can't move anymore, and it lasts afterwards. Most of the time when you go through training pain, which is good pain, it doesn't continue on. You're not continuously in pain after you finish a set. You get the burning sensation, you move through it, it fucking sucks. You give yourself 30 seconds, you breathe through, and then you feel normal. You just then feel exhausted. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that is everything that we wanted to cover in this podcast, right?
I think so. That really is, I think, a pretty good sum up of what champion mentality is around, the mind, taking yourself to the 1%, being the 1%, not just doing, but actually excelling, then moving into training. This all applies as well. Mindset applies, understanding important training facets, kind of recovery and things like that as well. You've touched on all of that sort of stuff. I'm sure if there's a topic in this that's come up that people want us to hear or want to hear more about or want us to speak more on, they can let us know in the comments. But let's wrap it.
Yeah, we managed absolutely everything. Good versus bad pain, sleep, limiting behaviors, important sleep recovery, training intensity, what is mentality, and we even got in a sex joke.
We did too.
Fucking smashed it.
I know. Oh, I just want to do a really quick, actually, to finish up, super
Go for it.
boom, 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 how to train better, recovery edition, sauna if you can, really good from a recovery perspective, Epsom salt, magnesium salt baths, really good for anti-inflammation and for recovery, rolling, if you're not doing it, you freaking should be.
Yeah, and rolling isn't just rolling over it like a fucking rolling pin. You want to find the sore spot and fucking stay there and breathe through it. It's something I've had to learn to do. It sucks. And it's so much worse on quads, I swear to God.
Yeah, it's brutal. But most knee pain is just tight quads.
Yeah, if you have knee pain, roll your quads first, then see if you still have knee pain.
Exactly.
Roll and then stretch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Roll, stretch, sauna, Epsom salt bath, go and see a physio, a chiro, and or a masseuse at least once a month.
Yeah, and make sure it's actually a sports massage. Don't just go to your local Thai, Asian, South Asian massage parlor and just get a remedial massage. They honestly do fucking nothing.
Not for athletes, not for trained individuals who are trying to really recover the body,
No. They're kind of, I wouldn't even say that they're good for the general population person that sits behind a desk, because the way that they go over the knots, they just don't get them out. They'll help you kind of relax a little bit.
Yes, that's right.
But no, I've never actually gone out, finished one of those and gone, actually, you know what? I feel better.
Go and do one of those types of massages when you're looking at your mental recovery and you're looking at your mental health, that side of things.
And just make sure that you go soft on the remedial massage, because otherwise they go too hard and then it is not good for your mental health.
You got to find the right balance.
They just go fucking pain. They're like, how hard do you want to get it out? Yeah, go get it out. And they're like, oh, and they're just fucking massaging the shit out of your back, and you're just like,
come out of there broken.
yeah, I've come
great.
out of there bruised and not feeling better.
Yeah. So those are keys to actually train better.
And the big thing about when you are saunaing, make sure that you drink lots of water when you're in there, because obviously you're going to dehydrate through sweating. You need to replenish water and electrolytes.
Yes.
That's the big thing about hydration that a lot of people miss, is that they just drink a fuck ton of water, but then they don't actually hydrate with electrolytes. So make sure you're getting your magnesium. You can also get obviously electrolyte supplements, sugar-free, which are really good with the potassium and sodium. You don't want to overdo it with potassium. So yeah, don't overdo it with electrolytes. If you're a trained individual and athlete, you can actually handle more than the average person because you're going to be sweating more. But yeah, that's my advice on that. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, guys. We really appreciate you listening to us waffle on for another hour and a half. It's a little shorter than last time. If you have any questions about anything, shoot us a message on Instagram or to our email, coaching@beyond-fit.com.au. And we appreciate your support. Have an amazing evening.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.